So there was some other news out there in pro wrestling that has to do with AEW. This is not an AEW podcast, but we went AEW heavy tonight because they had the show. One Richard Starks debuted with NXT, even though he was released like 2 days prior. But
did Ricky Starks debut with NXT?
They're not saying the guy's name. I don't know if he's gonna have his Ricky Starks name or not. I think he owns the name, but they also have Zoe Starks on the main roster, and I'm like, well, maybe they don't want him to have his name. It's not that unusual to have two people with the same last name. Like, Adam Cole and Michael Cole were working in the same company. Nobody got confused there, but but I don't know. Are they gonna let him keep his name? And do you think this is a good fit for Ricky?
I'll be honest with you. I think a lot of the people that talked up, I like Ricky Starks. I always have. I think he got vastly overrated by the internet wrestling community because like he kind of became like, he's a good talker.
Yeah.
He's solid in the ring.
Yep.
Like I wouldn't say like, I think that people like, hey, you got to push him more. Bell to bell. He's nowhere near the top of that company when he was in AEW, Here's a hot take. I think Ricky Starks was used just fine for most of his run.
I mean, he beat CM Punk, right? In the Owen Hart tournament. He was the tag team champion for a while, and they had a disagreement. And I'm not going to say Ricky Starks was a bad guy for disagreeing because I don't know what the creative was. Right. Word is that they wanted him to feud with Big Bill, and he was going to beat Big Bill, and he didn't want to do that to Bill. So I don't know how true that is or what. I don't, but that's been out there in certain places. So I'm like, okay, but that's not that big of a disagreement to keep the guy off TV for a year. And what they did is they kind of made him into a martyr.
They did.
And then he got bigger and bigger and bigger from there. I like Ricky. I think Ricky's a good worker. He's a great talker. I think he could be a star. He is not a star. That's why he's in NXT, because they're going to treat him like a star. And then if he can get over at a sustained level for a long time, he will be more accepted on the main roster. If they brought that man to the main roster, he is not Pentagon. Pentagon has been a star on television for a long time. He is not the same level. And if they brought Ricky Starks in, I don't think most of those people wouldn't know who he was.
I think if he showed up at the Royal Rumble or something, people would know who he is. But I also think that Ricky's fine. I think that you define him down by debuting him in NXT. Like you're treating him like Shawn Spears and Ethan Page, and I think he's definitely above those guys. But at the same time, I think that he's definitely not as hot as he would have been, and I think you're defining him down by putting him in NXT, and maybe that's where he belongs right now. Yeah. I also think with Tony too is like he is a guy who's been photographed. He's Cody's buddy. Like he's Punk's buddy. So I mean, like he's friends with a lot of those guys. And I think it sounded like he was unwilling to commit long term. So Tony said, okay, if you're unwilling to commit long term, I'm not going to put you on TV. Right. Which I kind of get. You had one Malachi Black who ate up you invested a lot of TV time in over the last couple of years, who really gave you nothing. So I think it just became a poor marriage after a while. Sometimes you need to split, and it just doesn't work. I do think they made Ricky a martyr. I think that Tony's learned something because we had AEW releases this week, right? Yeah. Miro's out. Tony, Ricky Starks is out. Bear Bronson. Which Bear got released?
So it was but that was for a domestic violence
for sure. You had to, but like. It all kind of happened at once, and it's like they're finally starting to just okay, fine, get up, just go, just go.
You know what? I think what AEW needs is Doge to come in there and get rid of a lot of people that ain't doing much. So like
they get rid of the nuclear inspectors that actually were doing something and then scramble to bring it back because we're too stupid to realize what we're doing.
I would not recommend getting rid of the nuclear inspectors. just from a guy that's worked on a nuke base, like we need those guys. Trust me. Like
maybe we should really
coming from a guy who had to do nuclear surety inspections through that federal agency, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They're very important. Don't get rid of them. Yeah. And I had to do nuclear response exercises, and we need those guys. But I'm kidding about the Doge. But I do think that like he shouldn't be afraid because he's afraid of, and I don't know Tony personally, but this is my read on the situation just based off of what I'm seeing and what we read in reports, right? He doesn't want anybody to compare him to like Vince because Vince was firing people left and right. They just like Triple H just did it again. They fired like 10 people,
Mhm.
right? And you look at the list, everybody's like, okay, that makes sense. But they fired a lot of people during the pandemic and it left with bad taste in everybody's mouths. And he wanted to be the guy that was like, look, I'm going to fulfill these obligations no matter what. And
And there's a backside. There's a backside of that.
yeah,
When you fulfill people's obligations, no matter what, you wind up keeping a lot of people who really don't want to be there, who become negative influences in your locker room, and then say, "Well, fine, we'll just not bring them here." And
yeah,
then they become martyrs. Like Miro,
yeah.
Miro didn't want to do anything. Miro had the Redeemer run was great, but
It
after
was
that,
awesome. Yeah.
he became like a pain in the ass. So then it becomes, but again, because we're in a culture war with professional wrestling, it becomes, why is it Miro on TV? Miro should go back to WWE where he was miserable.
Right. Where
Like
he was cuckolded on TV.
literally,
Right.
he was literally a cuckold
Literally. Yeah.
on TV. Like, and maybe at some point, maybe the problem is you. Like
Right.
Andrade couldn't wait to go back to WWE. He went back to WWE, got divorced, and has the speed title.
Yeah. Yeah. And he came out on Royal Rumble 1 year later and nobody cared.
Yeah.
And
So I mean,
and the
like, be
funny
careful.
thing is, here's the sad thing about Andrade. He's fucking great. He really is great.
He's his own worst enemy.
He's his own worst enemy. He kind of like and when he left WWE the first time, he was flipping them off on the way out. He went to AEW and he was trying to beat up Sammy Guevara to get out of there,
Mhm.
and finally got out of there. And now he's back in WWE, and he is essentially an afterthought just 1 year later.
I mean,
It
like,
is,
because he doesn't matter. I mean, like, because he's a pain in the ass. They wanted Andrade back, one, probably to make Charlotte happy, which wound up didn't matter, and two,
yeah,
to stick it to Tony a little bit. And now they're like, oh, fine, we'll just give him the speed title, do whatever. Like,
yeah,
it doesn't. They're fine. Let those guys go. They don't help you in the long run. Like, and having Andrade in AEW, he had some good matches on occasion, but
he
did
did.
it really help you? I mean, like, they have too many guys under contract now. Like, I would love to see more Roosh. I don't know if Roosh is hurt again or what, but I
I
mean, like,
so I think Roosh is having similar problems that Andrade had when he was there.
yeah, I mean, because that's what they have
Yeah,
everywhere they go.
yeah,
Like, you sign guys that have reputations. When they first opened and Jim Cornette was bitching about All Friends Wrestling, everybody was happy and there were no problems, right? Then they started signing people with some questionable attitudes, and all of a sudden you had problems. So you
yeah.
tell me what was better for that company, when it was All Friends Wrestling or when everybody hated each other and stuff started to fall apart. Like, you gotta build the right team. Remember Miracle? What a great movie. Like,
Mhm.
it's about finding the right guys, not about finding the best guys.
Yeah. You
And
got
I
you got
think
to find the best guys that fit your system, right?
exactly.
And that fit your culture. Big team guys, great football teams. And then you mentioned Miracle, a hockey movie, same
Mhm.
same concept. Great football teams, when they're going to the draft and they're doing the interviews with these people, they will draft somebody that has lesser athleticism because they feel like they're going to fit their culture,
Yep.
that versus the guy that they think is going to be a prima donna, right?
Yep.
And I think when WWE released all those guys, Miro, Malachi, Andrade, Buddy Matthews was one of those guys, where we felt like maybe he was a malcontent for a little bit. He seems like he's doing great now, but back in the day, we kind of thought that. I really think Vince saw this coming. Because it happened in the 90s with WCW. He's like, we're going to lose all these guys. And that kid over there, he probably, because, Vince is like 75 years old at the time. He's like, that kid over there is not going to be able to resist bringing those guys in. Right. Even though whenever they created AEW, Tony Khan was on Chris Jericho's podcast saying that we're not going to sign too many people. We're not out to sign everybody. We're here to sign the right people. And then all those people got released, and then they became the company of the surprise debut, and that became their go-to. They're doing surprise debut after surprise debut, and they were going to be like this big charitable professional wrestling organization. They're going to bring everybody in. You can have a home here. Bring us your tired, you're hungry, and poor, right? like it was the Statue of Liberty of fucking pro wrestling. And then they came all over there. They signed up a bunch of bad apples that kind of spoiled the whole barrel. And finally, it took him years, but he's finally slowly starting to get rid of those guys. And really, he should have done it 2 years ago. But look, we're here
100%.
now, and so I'm glad that we're here now. Next on the list, Fenix. I think Fenix is probably going to be out
He's
within the
probably,
next month or so.
And look what happened now. Fenix is going to be way cooler coming in than he would have been a couple. I mean, cool as in like not as hot because Penta's already working on main event. Is Dave LaGreca mad about that? By the way, is Dave LaGreca bitching about Penta being on main event? I don't know.
I don't know because here's probably LaGreca's thinking. Penta was on Raw too that night. He just didn't wrestle on Raw, but he did do a segment on Raw. But he wrestled on main event, so that's probably what they're thinking.
Yeah, they're figuring out that Penta's a little bit like Monet,
I like Penta, but that
Me
man
too.
He's a botch machine. But
always has been. His whole career, he's been like that.
He's kind of like Sabu, just less dangerous.
Slightly less dangerous. Yeah. Like no, agreed. He's very. I love Sabu. Part of the charm is, is he gonna fuck up? Yep. Like, yeah. So I mean, I agree. Tony has to and this is part of the growing pains with like working with people is you got to learn things because Vince had those same mistakes too. There's been times in WWE there were tons of malcontents in there, and Vince poisoned the well. I remember we had a discussion with a buddy of ours, and he said, like, I think Vince is doing this on purpose to try to, because they remember all friends wrestling, everybody was happy. Now we're going to introduce a lot of poison. Let's not remember Vince's NWO promo. What poison?
And you know what? What happened when he brought Hall and Nash and Hogan in? Immediately, locker room revolted. Right? Immediately.
Yep.
Like it took a while to kind of rebuild that culture there. They had to get rid of Scott because he was obviously he had his problems. Nash did them a favor by getting hurt. They put the title on Hogan, and then that went south quick. They had to pull the title right off of him. Like they learned a lot of lessons by bringing those guys back in. But Vince said it himself. He has the quote, "Perhaps I'll give them some more," when talking about the talent that AEW has been signing. Right?
Tony couldn't resist, and he's got people in his ear saying, "You got to get this guy. You got to get that guy." Sometimes some of those signings work out pretty good. I think if people are harder on Cope than I am, I kind of around. I think having fun when he's up. I think having I can watch some of the stuff I missed. I think those have been good pickups. Like if you get guys that want to play ball and actually want to make that company better, sure. But then you get a bunch of guys who think they're too cool for school. Your Andrades, your Malakais, your Miros. Like all you're doing is fucking up your own stuff. CM Punk, you had to take that risk. But in retrospect, I don't know, man. I don't know if that risk was worth it or not.
Yeah.
You were cooler before you had. I mean, they were a cool company. They were the upper company before Punk came in. Punk put them over the top. And then at the end of the day, it's the scorpion and the frog thing. Like you knew what I was when we started this journey. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I think Tony fucked himself on a lot of these things.
Well, signing all those people allowed them to have a roster big enough with enough stars to be able to take on Collision. And I think that ultimately, despite the fact that they got extra money for it, a lot of fucking money, right? It led to this big TV deal that they have. But the content over time started to degrade, which degraded ticket sales. And so it became a whole issue. But it looks like they're starting to kind of get their wind of their sales again. They've had several episodes in a row right now that are looking really good. They just did 11,000. Obviously, it was overseas. So brand new market in Brisbane. So hopefully they can get things back on track and start doing good again in the States.
Pull up the last comment by TGV. I want to dispute this because I don't think he's listened to us from back then, from when we talked about this.
You won't like this. However, CM Punk wanted to do right by AEW. However, the issue was the friends of friends that caused issues. So, look, there's a lot of wrong people in that situation. CM Punk wasn't the only wrong one. I think the Young Bucks were not cool with the way that they did the silent treatment, were very passive aggressive and all that stuff. Tony Khan sucks as a leader. He does not know how to manage people, especially like alpha males and creative people. That's why he's not the head coach of the Jaguars, right? He is a data analytics guy, right? He's not out there coaching them players. So I think there were a lot of wrong people. The guy that was the most wrong was CM Punk. He was in control of the situation. He's the veteran. He could have not done what he did, yet he still did it. And I think rightfully so, he was fired. That doesn't mean that other people weren't wrong too. He just happened to be the most wrong.
Yeah, and this is kind of the point we made is everybody was wrong in this situation, and we were more pro Punk than most of our brethren for a lot of this stuff.
JD, who is your favorite wrestler? Who did you, other than Sting, who are you dressing up for as Halloween?
CM Punk.
CM Punk. His profile picture for the longest time was him in a CM Punk t-shirt, dressed as CM Punk for Halloween. Yeah.
Oh yeah, thanks for bringing that up. No, I mean, like, and again, like, it's one of the most
Fucking Mark.
heartbreaking things. Mark, fucking Mark, totally, it's totally true. Like the way he handled it, like, he was very political behind the scenes,
Yeah.
right? Like he aired dirty laundry on television that didn't need to be done, right?
Yeah.
He tanked a lot of things that didn't need to happen. Like Paige had, like, trying to fire him and Cole Cabana, letting their beef become part of the company is a problem,
Yeah.
right? He could have taken the high road numerous times and chose not to. The Young Bucks could have buried some shit a long time ago, chose not to. The only guy who got sucked into this whole thing, everybody kind of admit, was Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega was just trying to be there, and he wound up in a bunch of shit, and he was like, what the hell? Why am I in trouble for all this stuff? Like,
Yeah.
and again, it's like you let a lot of outside influences ruin this thing. And dude, CM Punk's my favorite wrestler. I could listen to his promos forever. But he wasn't the same guy after he broke his foot.
Yeah.
Realistically speaking, like when he broke his foot and he let a lot of his mental demons fester, that was the problem. And
Mm-hmm.
he's a guy who just can't be happy. And we got little birdies telling us he's not so happy over at WWE all the time either. So it can't always be somebody else's fault.
Right. Yeah. Everywhere he goes, he takes himself with him. So,
That's
but
the problem with all of us, is everywhere we go, we take ourselves with us.
mhm.
Right. So all your baggage gets pulled in no matter what situation you're in. Dude, I got in a fight with a referee today because I got to go with me everywhere I go, and I have to be an asshole everywhere I go. So I mean, like,
Yeah.
it just is what it is.
Yeah. So last thing before we get out of here,
Yeah.
I'm sure you didn't even hear about this, but
Probably.
so TNA, um, they were in a little bit of chaos this week, and it was again fake chaos. There was no real chaos. They fired Christy Hemme, who was their marketing senior vice president of marketing,
Was she
and
really?
since October,
I had no idea.
yeah. They just brought her in October. She had been working with the company for like 20 years in different positions, and she was out there. She's back in. She's been kind of been in and out, and so they recently brought her up to do some marketing. Head the marketing department. Well,
Really?
they fired her, and they fired Josh Matthews, who was a kind of a television producer for them. So they actually hired this guy George Veras, who has been working in the NFL, CBS, ABC, NBC. He was the head of production for the NFL Today, and was most recently working with the NFL Hall of Fame. They hired him as their head of production, so he's kind of like their Lee Fitting for like WWE. They kind of like modeled the new structure. So they brought in their version of a Lee Fitting, which is George Veras, right? This guy that's got his own production company. He's kind of a big time guy. They brought in another lady named Andrea Panganelli, who's coming over from she's done NFL, Major League Baseball. She was most recently with cycling, the professional cycling, to be their marketing manager. They brought in the old Ring of Honor director, Mark Brown, I think. Guys in the chat, correct me if I think it's Mark Brown. So they hired a new director of television. They're all starting up this coming up week. They are looking like a real company, and it's fucking weird. What are your thoughts, JD?
These are great hires. Like these are professional hires. The problem with pro wrestling is we always assume that if people in pro wrestling should be working in pro wrestling.
Ding, 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 ding. You nailed it right there.
Like, we don't think about, does this person actually have skills, like, to do the
Yeah.
job that they're doing? Now, it doesn't mean they don't have those skills just because they're in pro wrestling. But, like, why was Christy Hemme the head of marketing?
Yeah. So, and that was I'm not saying that Chrissy Hemme wasn't a good marketing person. In fact, I thought that the marketing department actually seemed like it was improving, based off of some of the ticket sales they were doing, some of the houses they were doing. It felt like it was improving, but they brought in somebody that's got like legit, like worldwide experience on a high level to do it. And it's like, that's like a no brainer. I get the feeling Christy might've took some classes and stuff like that. I heard that about Josh Matthews too. Like he took some classes and was doing some like TV stuff for them, but they brought in a guy that's got like 40 years experience to run their production now and has like a full team. So it's like, it's weird to sit here and say that TNA is starting to resemble like a real well-managed professional wrestling company. And it's taken them, since Anthem purchased it in 2017, it's taken them all these years.
I don't know. I debate it wasn't even a well-managed wrestling company when Dixie was running it, quite frankly.
Well,
Like,
yeah, but the production was always like pretty decent, although
yeah,
they did
yeah.
have a guy from World Class who was missing a lot of shots, but
Keith Mitchell.
Keith Mitchell, yeah. So
Keith Mitchell is just that's just Keith Mitchell, man. That's
yeah,
just he was like that in WCW and World Class. It's just Keith Mitchell. Um, I'm happy for TNA. Like they finally Anthem finally said, hey, you know what? We have this thing. Let's just like try.
yeah.
And it took them years to go, okay, fine, let's just try. And it's been better for the company. Like, I still have no interest in it. It's just not for me. But I'm happy. You seem like a
Yeah.
lot happier covering TNA lately. Like the people that cover like a lot of our fans are TNA fans, so they seem like in a much better place with it. So good for them.
Well,
Like,
look, I can't get everything that I want, but a lot of the things that they can control, because what I want them to do is book everything the way that I want them to book it, right? Which is
yeah.
just never going to happen. So that's like unreasonable. But for years we talked about it. Like they need to upgrade their production. They need like a real production team instead of like using like interns and
Mike,
like people.
we used to bitch on Brace for Impact about them not white balancing the
Yeah,
cameras.
yeah,
Like, we're so far from that right now. Like, it was like watching Big Ten student network shows.
yeah.
Like, I watch Big Ten networks. That's what wrestling is. It's always the student produced stuff that you watch, wrestling on the Big Ten network. And they were awful. And that's what watching Impact felt like for a long time. And if they're getting back to being professional again, good for them. Like, but again, like I was saying before, I think we just assume that wrestling people can do wrestling jobs. It's like people that were real upset that Maria Kanellis wasn't the booker of
Hmm.
Ring of Honor. And it's like, why would you think that Maria can? I mean, I think it's someone else has been fired from every job she's ever had in
Yeah.
professional wrestling. Let us not forget that everywhere she's worked, it's been, thank you, Maria, goodbye, everywhere,
Yeah.
multiple times with some companies. Like, why would we assume because she booked a tournament once that she should be booking? I just don't understand. Like, I get it. We want female voices in wrestling, but I think we want it to the point where we want familiar faces
Hmm.
having these positions. Like that guy, like I remember someone said Brian Danielson should be the booker. Why? What
Yeah.
makes you think that should
What
happen?
territory did he ever book? And now
That's
you want him to book the number 2 professional wrestling company in the world?
Yeah, and I don't understand why we just assume because people are in the maybe it's just a Jim Cornette thing where back in the day, like not everyone that booked was great at booking back then too.
Yeah.
I want people to tell me why Colonel Buck Robley was a phenomenal booker. I'd love you to tell me why. You can't because all you have is what somebody else said about him 30 years ago. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like you
Yeah.
don't know that these things worked. Like it's just I don't know.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. When someone gets hired for like a creative position, I'm just like, okay, what was the idea that they had that you liked? Can you spell it out for me? And nobody really can do that. So I'm like, it's hard for me to advocate. But with these hires, at least in the marketing and when in the production, like I don't know if these guys can produce or market wrestling. I have no idea. Maybe they're gonna stink. But what I do know is I can read their resume. And it's like they got a track record of success that nobody that they've ever hired before actually has, like mainstream, like professional sporting success.
Isn't that what we want from people? Like, think about if you're getting
Yeah.
a job in the real world. Like, if I were to walk in to, I don't know, Goldman Sachs and say, hey, I want a job here. And they're looking at my resume like, well, you're a cameraman and you were a teacher. So why would we hire you? And I
Yeah.
just be like, well, because I'm cool, you should hire
Right.
me. Like, that's just kind of what it feels like to me. Like, well, I used to cut interviews on TV. I should absolutely be telling you how to run your television production. What?
Right.
Like, it
Like
doesn't make sense.
Christy Hemming's like, well, I did wrestle for a while and I did the ring announcing. Of course I know how to market, right? It's like, well, hold
That's what
on.
I'm that's what I'm
Like,
saying.
what
Like,
marketing firm are we hiring you from? You're not actually from a marketing firm. And look, I'm not trying to say anything bad about Christy Hemme. I think she probably did a pretty
no,
good job.
we could pick on Josh Matthews too. I don't understand why
Right.
Josh Matthews should be running the television department, you know?
Right. Right. So I'm like, I got nothing against Christy Hemme. I think it's an
No.
emotional thing because everybody likes her. I certainly do. I liked her on TV for a long time. But the problem is like I don't know that she was good or not. I just don't know. But I can tell you is the person they hired is good because look at the resume, right?
Mhm.
They got the resume, and
That's
so
why.
like
Dude, there's class.
people like these Anthem people. And here's the difference between like Anthem right now with the people they have in charge. So they got it basically set up with Carlos Silva as the president, Ariel Scherner, he is like the de facto Triple H of the company, and they brought in George Ferris, who's basically their Lee Fitting. He's in charge of all the production, right? They have these are people that are business minded. They're not pro wrestling lifers. And if you're not good at your job, they're just going to get rid of you. They don't care. They're like, that's a professional organization. Whereas before, under the previous regime, it seemed like it was more of a mom and pop shop. They had the next man up mentality. It's like, well, hey, we lost this person in production. Well, we'll just train up the next person. Instead, they decided, no, we're just gonna hire professionals.
I have to pull this up. I'm a bad person.
Okay, what happened?
Dream Ultra Crazy says, why did Triple H get the head job of creative? He's an average booker at best. We all know the answer to that question.
Yeah. Well, he married the boss's daughter, right? Got invited to a lot of booking meetings. But here's the thing. He also just won back-to-back Booker of the Year in the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Now you can say that's a bullshit title, but a lot of people were praising Tony Khan for winning that. Mm-hmm. but he's won it back-to-back years. So business is good for them.
I think he's a meat and potatoes booker myself, but sometimes there's a reason why meat and potatoes are good.
Yeah.
Right. It's not. I have problems with WWE and their creative.
Godilla's doing
a bad job. Godilla's in the chat.
He's in the chat. He said, "Happy belated born day to the big homie JD."
Thanks,
Godilla does our theme song, so thank you for being here, Godilla. As long as he's not in here talking football, he's allowed to stay. But he starts talking football, he's fucking gone. I can't handle it.
He gets to talk some shit,
dude. He's been fucking unbearable.
I mean, like. That's what happens when your team wins. You get to talk shit. I mean, I live in Chicago, so I will never ever get to talk shit about anything. So I just have to sit there and listen to everybody else talk shit about it and just sit there and go, we suck.
But all right, guys, that I ended the show burying Godilla, which is my favorite thing to do. So we have gone overtime. So that's going to do it for us this week. Head over to patreon.com/the Mike and JD show. If JD and I can't get together in the middle of the week, I'll probably just do my own thing, but we should really get to an overtime soon. But I did do like a full hour in the middle of the week, a full blown episode doing that.
I got 1 week left of high school wrestling season. Okay. 1 week left of high school wrestling season. It's limping toward its finish, and then life will open up a lot more for me. As I explained to my college professor this past week in an email, like I just need some time.
Yeah. Ella says, I pay you $5 a month to bury me. It's like, yeah.
Yep. Thanks.
Yeah. No, he buries me more. But all right, guys, that's gonna do it for us this week. And until next time, mahalo.
Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you brought your A game. A made no rain from the track when we unite and spit. This isn't A game, better bring your A game. Competition starting to get thick.